Order, order. Bob Seeley to move the motion.
Thank you very much indeed, and it is a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, Madam Chairwoman. Islands have a unique place in our identity of the British Isles. We are a collection of islands. Some islands are bigger than others. Our islands are marked out by their sense of history, their sense of community, their geography, the uniqueness very often of their geography, of their wildlife, and in some cases indeed of their geology as well. And for the Isle of Wight, my constituency, I'm going to make the case for a specific island designation. It's not a national park on the island, it is a new designation in UK landscape protection, which I believe should be introduced not only for the Isle of Wight, but would be a very considerable benefit for other islands in the UK, and certainly could be seen as a UK-wide designation, because there are many Scottish islands who may wish to be part, Anglesey, the Scilly Isles, and indeed the Isle of Wight, so it stretches to Scotland and Wales and England. This plan, or my plan for an island designation for the Isle of Wight, is supported by the Isle of Wight Council and our Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty Partnership, the AONB. And it would effectively put into law a landscape designation given to us by the UNESCO, by our UNESCO biosphere status, even if initially that was a sort of shadow designation on the way to becoming law, or the way to becoming something more legally binding in the UK, because as we know, the UNESCO biosphere is not legally binding. In support of this, and I know the Minister's heard this argument very recently, and I'm looking forward to seeing her on the 13th, and I'm officially inviting her now to the Isle of Wight, if she'd come down to look, so she can see with her own eyes some of the points that I'm trying to make about the physical unity of the island. I would be most grateful, and I look forward to seeing her very soon on the island as well. So in support of my argument, I'm going to explain why the island is exceptionally rare in the sense of diversity of its animal life, its marine habitat, geology, and why, frankly, I feel over the years it should have been much more valued for its uniqueness and for its value to the UK that it has been by policymakers. So let me kick off my argument. The Isle of Wight is pretty much geographically unique. In the words of our AONB, it's a microcosm of the whole of England. So the east resembles Kent and Sussex, and with its thick hedges, copses and woods, the stone walls and the small sandy bays in the south, around the undercliff feel rather like Cornwall. The wind-swept chalk downs which roll to the sea where I live in the southwest resemble parts of Dorset, and the creeks of Yarmouth and Newtown and Wootton in the north of the island resemble very much those in Devon. To put all that into terms that geographers might recognise, and I apologise because I'm repeating myself on the recent debate, but I want to get this down for the record because it shows the variety of habitats in the island, Madam Chairwoman. Broadleaf mixed and new woodland, maritime cliff and slope, including our unique chines, the a soft sandstone which has been moulded and shaped by waters and rivers as they flow to the sea, the low calcareous grassland, our coastal and floodplain, our grazing marsh, lowland meadows, reed beds, lowland dry acidic grassland. We have fens on the island, we have saline lagoons, we have mudflaps, we have coastal sand dunes, we have coastal vegetative shingle, and we have the lowland heathland, these beautiful chalk downs with their rare flowers and insects, and quite often adders and lovely things like that, that provide the island spine, which runs from Bembridge in the east, all the way through past Mee and Motterston and Bryston, all the way down to the Needles in the west. And all this is in one compact island. 30 miles is its widest east to west, and 15 miles from north to south, from Cowes in the top to beautiful St Catherine's down at the bottom. It is one of the most diverse areas of England, and one of the three most diverse areas in the southeast of England, along with the New Forest and the Surrey Heaths. And I would respectfully argue that our variety of wildlife and our habitat diversity is greater than both of those two, not wishing to be critical of them because they're unique and fantastic as well. Our English landscape in miniature and our range of habitats means that we continue to be home to species that are either unique on the island, or perhaps more importantly for the mainland as a whole, for the UK as a whole, are not flourishing on the mainland, but are either less threatened or frankly better off on the island. So we don't have grey squirrels, although one once got on a ferry had to be stopped. We don't have escaped mink, and we don't have escaped deer. But we do have red squirrels, we do have dormice, and we do still have water voles. And I thank Helen Butler and the Isle of Wight Red Squirrel Trust for the important work that she does. We have some of the UK's rarest bats. I thank our wonderful Isle of Wight Natural History and Archaeological Society for listing all 17 bat species, but we have some really unique and highly rare ones like the greater horseshoe bat, Bechstein's bat, and the grey long-eared bat. Mammals aside, I asked Natural England for a list of rare species in terms of insects and flora and fauna. They came back with 28 species. And they include Ernie gentian, field cowwheat and wood calamint. On rare insects, the island is the sole British location for the Glanville fritillary butterfly, as well as the reddish buff moth. And I thank Jim Baldwin for his excellent work in cataloguing the many moths that we have on the island. Not an easy job, but somebody's got to do it, so thank you, Jim. For our birds, the Solent is a Ramsar designated site, and we have wetlands of international importance on both sides of the Solent. But on the island specifically, the Minister would be interested, I hope to note, that in Brading, in Newtown and in Western Yar, marshes and estuaries are highly important for migrating birds. So we have 5 which are rare or threatened, including terns, teals and a variety of plover. Brading Marshes is a SSSI, a SAC, a Ramsar designated wetland and an RSPC nature reserve, not in the AONB, just say. Forestry England and the Roy Dennis Foundation reintroduced the sea eagles in England on the Isle of Wight. And I would like to thank Steve Edgerton-Reid, Forestry England's project officer for the sea eagles, for showing me around Brading Marshes when we spotted one, I think it was a female sea eagle, perched on a tree looking for breakfast, I think about a year ago. Buzzards, once rare, are relatively plentiful, and we have a healthy population of adders. As regards our marine environment, the areas surrounding the Isle of Wight are protected by maritime conservation zones, special protection zones, and special areas of conservation, Madam Deputy Chairman. Again, I asked Natural England for a list of species that I should be aware of, and they said that there are 26 species around the island that are nationally scarce or globally vulnerable. So we are a relative haven for many different types of species, whether on land or on sea. And that is an important part of an island designation for me, Madam Chairwoman, because it would include the marine environment, the human environment, and the landscape environment. A bit like UNESCO Biosphere, but in UK law. Amongst those very rare species, and again, I'm not going to list them all because of respect for people's time, native oysters, both our variety of native seahorses, the short-snouted and the long-snouted, varieties of jellyfish, rays and other types of species. We also have seagrass meadows in Osborne Bay and Yarmouth and Boldner. And indeed, we are using those seagrass meadows those seagrass meadows are being used to transplant seagrass meadows to the other side of the Solent into the Bewley River. So the relative strength of our natural world is being used to support others. And indeed, we might be doing a project to reintroduce UK crayfish back into the Isle of Wight, because we know that the UK population, the UK's indigenous crayfish, has been decimated by the American crayfish, which, like the grey, was imported and proved itself far more aggressive and predatory. Geologically, along the southwest of the island, we have a near complete exposure of Cretaceous coast. Basically, we have this stuff called Wealden Rock. It's orange, and it produces dinosaur bones. And for most of the UK, it sort of flows, undulates well underneath the surface, but sticks up in the southwest of the island over a period of area of about 11 miles. A little patch in Sandown in the east as well. And because of that, and then the sea and the tides gently wash away that coastline, and that is the reason why we have the richest dinosaur finds in Europe. I mentioned the family dinosaur last time. I won't go there again because we don't have time. The Undercliff, a breathtakingly beautiful part of the island on the south side, is the most geologically unstable part of Europe. So what does all this mean? I'm not just listing this for a purpose to say how wonderful my constituents is, because everyone can say that about theirs, although clearly the island is unique and special. I'm trying to make the point that our variety, our diversity, our depth of habitat, the different types of habitat we have, the different types of wildlife, of flora, of insects, of marine and animal life, is pretty much unique in the UK. And I feel that the island should have had a special and unique role in this country's protected landscapes, and it hasn't been. But indeed, our landscape and our natural world has been celebrated by many different types of artists over the years. It was J.B. Priestley, one of the great 20th century authors who lived on the island, who actually said that the island should be Britain's first national park. We missed that boat, sadly. I'm not arguing for that, but I'm arguing for an island designation. But even before Priestley wrote his, he wrote Inspector Calls, actually, when he was living in the village next to me. Island uniqueness was celebrated by Alfred Lord Tennyson, by Keats, who wrote Endymion, A Thing of Beauty is a Joy Forever, allegedly about Shanklin Chine, one of our wonderful geographical, geological little sort of chines that we have. Britain's greatest artist, W.M. Turner, sketched and painted on the island. Algernon Swinburne, another great Victorian poet, lived in Bonchurch. Indeed, the Freshwater and Bonchurch sets of the 19th century were heavily influential in the UK. Julia Margaret Cameron pioneered early portrait photography on the island in Freshwater. And in 1850, the daughter of William Makepeace Thackeray said, "Is there no one who is commonplace here? Is everyone either a poet or a genius or a painter?" I'm tempted to say yes. The island had one of the most painted coastlines in Britain, along with North Yorkshire and Cornwall. We haven't done enough with our artistic and cultural heritage, and sadly, we've forgotten far too much of it since World War II. That is another story. We do, coming to designations, we do have a single island-wide designation, the UNESCO Biosphere, which was awarded to us in 2019, and I thank everyone involved in that, Joel Bateman, Richard Grogan, and indeed many others. But it comes with no legal standing in the UK. And so in UK designation, the problem is instead of being treated as a single whole, we had some guy from the ministry turn up in the mid-1960s and parcel out the island into 5 blotches of A, O and B. And I found that incredibly frustrating because if you go to other larger A, O and Bs on the mainland, considerably larger, you could drive through bits of the Cotswolds and actually some of it's pretty flat and very ordinary and boring. But it is part of a greater whole. And it is included because it is part of a greater whole, because there is a greater beauty around it. And I just find it bizarre that somewhere that should be treated as a single whole, you would have thought if anywhere, Madam Chairwoman, should be treated as a single whole in the UK, it is a relatively small island, even if it's got lots of different types of habitat, because it is a single whole. It has many habitats within it, but all of which feed and function off each other. And so for me, the Isle of Wight being parcelled 52% AONB, which is almost entirely focused on lowland heathland, I mean, our extraordinary braiding marshes and the dry land around it was not included in the AONB, and many other parts of the west and the south weren't included in the AONB and now under development pressure. So, yeah, we are a relative refuge for wildlife, but we're also more vulnerable than parts of the mainland because we're finite, because we're not that large. And as Natural England notes, our finite landscape is actually being damaged at quite a pace. Urban development is spreading, and I'm quoting from its reports, waste disposal sites, holiday and industrial developments, and caravan parks are blurring the edges of settlements. In the last 50 years, we've lost some species. The extent to which rural landscapes have been disturbed on the island by urban development has increased by nearly 30%. And that figure is until 2007, and it's worse now. Some of our rivers are badly modified and badly damaged, etc. And even when we're protected by the AONB, we've seen that sometimes that is not enough. And there's something I'm working on, which I will mention now, because I really want the Minister to be aware of this, and I've written to the Secretary of State. Under Section 191 of the Town and Country Planning Act, there are time limits on enforcement of planning conditions which prevent planning authorities from taking action on historic breaches of planning. Even if that breach is minor, immunity then can be granted from planning conditions as a whole, which then permits development which should not take place. And on the Isle of Wight, we have one pretty awful development at Chine Farm, which exemplifies this problem. A minor breach of condition years ago involving camping in a field not specified by planning conditions has now been leveraged to permit the sighting of static caravans all year round. And that is in a triple SI on a heritage coastline in an AONB. And I've written to the Secretary of State on numerous occasions about closing this damaging loophole that affects both me and others. Anyway, moving on. The purpose of the Island Park designation would be to cover the entirety of the island. It would treat the island as a single whole. It would unite maritime and landscape protection in one. And common sense suggests that on an island, this is a sort of unified approach that we should be taking to not only landscape management, but also supporting farmers. If all my farmers on the island could, for example, have the farming in protected landscapes, they would be able to do things like plant more hedgerows, plant coppices to join up our natural row into a single whole. So you have these sort of natural corridors, be it the hedgerows and coppices. In fact, I saw some of those being planted last weekend at the Isle of Wight sheep trials, and it was great to see that, and thank you very much Ian Wheeler for his work. An island park would assume a basic standard when it comes to planning and housing akin to that of an AONB. So if the Minister is asking, Madam Chairman, what an island designation should consist of, the basic building blocks is AONB throughout, unless there is exception for development. Firstly. Secondly, better, more traditional standards in planning, beautifying, which I know is an important part of our planning and housing ideas anyway, a beautifying of our towns and villages to respect the traditional building methods, be they traditional Isle of Wight stone, which is pretty much unique to the island. You get it a little bit in West Dorset, but West Dorset and the Isle of Wight is pretty unique too, or patterned red brick as seen in Newport. That means that large-scale housing development, completely inappropriate to islands, would be banned in favour of small-scale development in existing communities. Pleading exceptional circumstance, which I hope we've negotiated with DLUC, would allow the island to focus overwhelmingly on finding homes for our local population and not have to fit into arbitrary targets which take absolutely no account of the Isle of Wight being separated by sea and is effectively an island. I'm going to wrap up in about 3 minutes if Madam Chair, if you're thinking about time. An island park designation would also help to serve branding. We have 56 food producers on the island. It would help them to brand their products better and help with tourism if people saw that they were going to somewhere that valued the nature and that had an extraordinarily rich natural world. So how would this come about? Briefly, the Glover Review recommended a wider range of systems of landscape protection. I'd hope that was going to mean primary legislation. If it doesn't, I mean, might it mean primary legislation? If not, a second option would be to amend the 1971 Isle of Wight Act. So if I came up high up the private members bill, would that be an option? A third option would be to extend the AONB. But this is an incredibly time, it takes seemingly years, up to 5 to 10 years. So I'm just wondering if there's another way of looking at this by getting some kind of shadow designation. So if the government was bringing in further environmental bills and further environmental acts in future, island parks, AONB, higher standards, opt-outs for job creation, because that's really important on islands. This is something that could appeal not only to the Isle of Wight, but potentially to the Scilly Isles, to the Western Islands in Scotland, and to Anglesey as well. This is potentially a really attractive idea. So to sum up, the island is unique. I don't think it's been valued enough in the last 50 to 60 years. We should have been a national park, we're not. But our natural habitat is unique. The variety of our habitat is unique. The sort of wildlife that we help to protect and finds a refuge from mainland the UK is relatively unique. Our tourism could really do with, I think, the sense of the island being an island park, not a national park, different designation. And I think that if we could work towards that, it would be of huge benefit. The island, I don't want to see the island become overdeveloped in the coming decades because it will ruin what's unique and special about it, certainly for as long as we are separated by sea from the mainland. And I leave her with the final thought that the government is committing to designate 30% of land as protected. I know we have our patchwork of protections, but a single encompassing whole, I think, would enable the government to meet its targets. In the island's case, it is absolutely deserved because of our contribution to the natural world, to our different habitats, to our geology. And therefore, I look forward to the Minister coming down to the island very soon to talk with me further about this, and I look forward to discussing it with her when we meet on the 13th. Thank you.
Is that this House has considered Isle of Wight island designation status and landscape protection. Minister Trudy Harrison.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and it's a real pleasure to serve under your chairmanship today, and always a pleasure to hear from my honourable friend as he speaks with such adoration such pride and passion, but I think most importantly, such a deep understanding and knowledge of the Isle of Wight, his constituency. And once again, he has powerfully and effectively set out his case for an island designation. And this is something that we are looking very closely at across DEFRA, and also which we will discuss in far more deep detail when we meet in another week or so. And Mrs Latham, he makes it absolutely impossible to do anything other than accept his kind invitation to visit the Isle of Wight. I will endeavour to do that during summer recess, to visit some of the projects. I would very much like to meet with Helen Butler in particular, who he referenced for her work in preserving the red squirrel colony on the island. But let me just set out, Madam Chairman, some of the reasons why the Isle of Wight is so incredibly special. We've already heard an incredibly insightful explanation of the species, but can I also reinforce that we have 41 sites of special scientific interest. We have a national nature reserve at Newton Harbour, managed by the National Trust, 8 local nature reserves covering over a square kilometre, and around half of the Isle of Wight's coastline of approximately 45 square kilometres is defined as a heritage coast at Tennyson and Hampstead. In addition, all of the waters around the Isle of Wight are designated under a network of marine protected areas covering an area of 331 square kilometres. These include 3 special area of conservations: South Wight, Solent Maritime, Solent and the Isle of Wight lagoons. There are 3 special protection areas at the Solent and Southampton Water, also recognised as Ramsar, and 3 marine conservation zones at Bembridge, Yarmouth to Cowes and the Needles. Just some of the incredibly unique special features of this wonderful place, which I'm very much looking forward to visit, especially after a good conversation with officials about the proposal, which is the crux of this debate. So I'm very happy to confirm that we have a meeting to discuss the proposals in more detail, and we'll be able to understand the landscape and the coastal areas in particular. Of course, all of England's landscapes are important, but our 44 national parks and areas of outstanding natural beauty are the most iconic and beautiful places. Covering almost a quarter of England, they contain over half of the SSSIs in England, around 542,000 hectares, and many of our most threatened species, such as the red squirrel, which he has a stronghold for, the curlew and water vole. Protected landscapes represent our shared heritage and national identity, and they're also home to our most special rural communities and businesses. Of course, Madam Chair, I am absolutely biased because I live in the English Lake District, and I know from first-hand understanding, having always lived in Cumbria, just how important protected landscapes are. It's one of the reasons that I'm so supportive of the Farming in Protected Landscapes fund that we're extending, which is eligible to farmers in areas of outstanding natural beauty and also national parks. Our current and future protected landscapes can play an important role in recovering nature, and by doing so contribute more towards our commitment to protect at least 30% of land by 2030, and we absolutely expect them to do so. And our recently published, I say recently, 31st of January this year, Environmental Improvement Plan sets out across 262 pages 10 goals of legal targets on how we will improve our soil quality, our air quality, our water quality, how we will increase tree canopy cover and increase the habitat for our vital species in order to achieve the apex target of halting nature's decline and increasing nature's abundance after 2030. We are developing a new outcomes framework and strengthened management plans for protected landscapes, But I think one of the most important additions that we're making off the back of the Environment Act is the local nature recovery strategies, which will be rolled out soon across all upper tier local authorities. And I would really recommend my honourable friend to engage with the LNRS, Local Nature Recovery Strategies team. I'm very happy to make that introduction because I think this will be critical, the linchpin in connecting landowners, farmers, NGOs, charities, people working with nature, but also the organisations across the island, the local authorities, to really reinforce how we will achieve that apex target of halting nature's decline. And what better place to achieve that than on the Isle of Wight? We're continuing to make great progress in taking forward an ambitious new protected landscape programme that was announced in 2021. A couple of those success stories are going to be the Yorkshire Wolds and the Cheshire Sandstone Ridge. They're being considered for designation as areas of outstanding natural beauty, along with extensions to the Surrey Hills and Chiltern AONBs. What I'm saying here, Madam Chairman, is that Natural England are fully committed at the moment with its current list of designations, but that is not to say we will not consider new designations. And I can't imagine a more powerful argument than the one my honourable friend has set out. So I will work closely with him and advise on the process and any hints and tips that we can perhaps help him and his island residents to make. I also understand the challenge of overdevelopment. He set out some poignant cases, and I look forward to working with the local nature recovery strategy teams and Natural England and his local authority to see what we can do about that. I too value the contribution that small developers could bring to the island to achieve the points that he made, his priorities around that designation of an island park or AONB across the island, homes for local people. Of course, that's a priority for this government. The right homes in the right places with the right sense of place. So important that we have beautiful homes which are sustainable and which feel like homes that belong on the Isle of Wight. And also hearing about 56 food producers and the importance of the visitor economy for the island as well. I think he set out that argument incredibly effectively, as always. So we will use the All England Mapping Tool, published in October 2022, to identify these landscapes, to improve nature and access, a personal priority for me, and also my responsibility in DEFRA to improve people's access to nature. That's why we have a commitment that everybody, wherever they live, will be able to access a green or a blue space within 15 minutes of where they live. It's why we're increasing access for walking and cycling, working with Active Travel England and the Department for Transport. We will also identify further conservation needs across England, including any other remaining places that may be suitable for the future designations, and we will take into account all of the information that he brings to our meeting in the next couple of weeks. And I really want to assure him, Madam Chairman, that we will consider the proposal for potential new approaches alongside other priorities through the All England Assessment Mapping Tool as we drive forward action to deliver, most importantly, to deliver on our environmental improvement plan and all of the goals for a growing and resilient network of land, water and sea that is richer in plants and wildlife and enhancing beauty of the natural environment. And ultimately, as we set out, to leave this place in a better state than we inherited it. So in conclusion, I very much look forward to the meeting on the 13th of June that we have, discussing all of the options, especially the role of local nature recovery strategies, and in particular his on the Isle of Wight, and ensuring that the valued landscape and coast of the Isle of Wight is safeguarded. I'm talking about my future plans to visit him on the island this summer. Thank you.